Boom. How good was this countdown?
I love it. Pretty awesome. I'm actually going to use it for my streams in the future.
It's really nice. I just don't know if there's like any sounds or anything like that, but it looks pretty cool, and it gives you more time to prepare, I guess. Hey everyone, if you're here, say hello, say hi, say something. I guess see, this is the problem with these streams. It's like there's a 30-second delay or something. Oh yeah, at least we have one person here. So hey, Boris. Hey. Oh yeah.
Hey, Boris. Welcome.
Chad, sit on. Nice.
Welcome
Everyone. Hi from south of France. Nice. Love to be there now. It's probably evening, but it's probably nicer.
Hey,
I don't know.
Going in a few months.
What's that?
We might be going in a few months.
To France?
Well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. KubeCon is in France, right? Yeah. I completely, yeah. It's always odd that the Chicago KubeCon hasn't started yet we already know what the next one is going to be. So that's interesting. Awesome. Hello from Montreal. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably Archie, who's signed in from the Kubernetes Canada account.
Yeah.
Hello, Archie. I know it's you. I know.
All right. Well, hey, Pradab. Yeah, there's a lot of people. Keep on coming. Keep on saying hi. We'll have Bangalore. Oh my God. Wow. All around the world. This is interesting. All right. So let's do like quick introductions. I'm Peter. I'm a developer advocate at Solo. And I've been working with Kubernetes and Istio and in general and cloud native for a while. I like to say for a while. I don't say the actual years because it's doesn't really matter, but it's been a while. Yeah, Marino, Alessandro.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead. Hey, everyone. My name is Marino Widjay. I am a developer advocate at Solo as well. We are here to just talk to you about all things service mesh. And I'll say that, certifications have taken a bit of a pause for the last little while because it takes a lot of time and planning and training. You have to sit there and practice, especially for a certification like the ICA. So it's nice to get back into the rhythm of things. And I'm a bit of a cert junkie. I've taken a lot of certifications throughout my career, starting from like the early Cisco days all the way out to VMware. Took a couple of Amazon and Google certs, and then kind of rounded out with some of the more cloud native focused certs. So I did the CK probably about 2 years ago. I can't remember. 3 years ago. Yeah, because it's expired now. Did my CCAT as well about 2 years ago. So I think it's about expired right now. I attempted the CKS. I didn't pass, and I had another attempt, but I let it lapse. So I never got the opportunity to take that again. So maybe I will in the future, but they did launch a new one. I think it's an associate level security cloud native cert that's available, and it's more multiple choice based. So maybe I should start there and then move towards the CKS. But hey, we're here for the ICA, so I'm gonna pass it along to Alessandro. Excited to see you all here.
Hey, glad to be here. So my history with the certification of the Linux Foundation goes way back. So I was in the beta of the CKA. Then I was in the CKD, helping, developing, and testing out. As a matter of fact, so I passed it very early, like both CKA, CKD, and then also CKS when it came out. And Michael is on the chat. So because I passed them very, very early, so I also got the trained trainer. So I actually one of the many, there's a few people, of course, certified trainer for the Linux Foundation. And I actually did a train the trainer for Michael and other people. So I train other trainers. So I'm actually very impressed by the how far along the certification came to be. First of all, because they are so hands-on, and I hope the Istio, I haven't seen it, of course, nobody has seen it yet, but the CK, CKD, CKS, the beauty of it is that it's fully hands-on, and you have to really get in front of a terminal and start typing and using all the tricks of the Linux terminal, right? So you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I also got the PCA. I don't know if you ever attempt that. So I passed the Prometheus Certified Administrator, which is also pretty tough, and I learned a lot by studying all the PromQL queries and stuff. And so now that the Istio certification came out, I immediately put my eyes on it. Unfortunately, we cannot even schedule it yet, but we really look forward to be fully certified in everything.
Yeah, it's looks like you guys actually have more experience with certifications than I do. I don't think I don't have any of the CKAs, the CKKKDs, whatever, all those that you so nicely typed in the comments there.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't realize that it would display as such. But I will say, like, I've even written certifications in the past as well when I was at VMware as well as Dell. Although those certifications really went nowhere, because by the time it's out, you've got a year where it's used, and then the technology ages out, so it refreshes all over again. Plus, then an organization changes strategy and they go in a different direction. But exam writing is actually very interesting, because you're locked in a room having to sit there with others negotiating on what should be on the exam, and then you follow that with having to sit there and write your questions and justify where everything is, or why everything is what it is, and then you debate the question. It's a long process, so I'm very thankful for.
I'm actually involved in there's a GitOps certification coming up, so I'm involved in writing some of those questions as well. So I'm a certification junkie. What can I say? It's once you get the hang of it, it's so cool. You want to have them all, right? So, but these ones in particular, I mean, I wouldn't say, I'm not gonna say other vendors or other organization, but this one in particular, the ones from the Linux Foundation, because they are so hands-on, you do need real world skills to pass them. It's not, you can't just study a book and go for it. It's not gonna get there, right? So
I mean, I would say there's value in both, right? But the ones that are hands-on, I prefer those because it feels like it feels like you actually have to know the thing. You can't like learn your way out of it, like for the multiple choice questions, you can think, oh, well, I could read a lot, right? And I can figure it out without even ever touching, or writing code or writing a YAML, maybe, right? But these are actual hands-on, so it's much more, I guess, much more realistic, right, in terms of showing what a person can do, right? Oh, Leon's here as well. Hey, Leon. All right, so I'm just going to quickly switch. I know we talked about this a little bit, right? But so this week, Mesh Week, what we're going to do is we'll talk about Istio Certified Associate certification. But more specifically, we'll actually talk about the different topics that are part of the certification, right? So the way that we taught this through is you could use these videos if you want to prepare for the exam, or if you just want to learn more about Istio, right? We'll use istio.io. There's a lot of great documentation there. There's a lot of great examples and scenarios and things that you can actually practice, right, for the exam. As Alessandro said, the exam you can purchase it already, but it's not going to be available until November, right? So if you purchase it today or whenever, that gives you, I guess, one more full month or more than a month to prepare if you want to pass it and if you want to be the first one to get that badge, right? So who is this exam for? Is a pre-professional certification designed for engineers, CI/CD practitioners, or anyone who has interest in Istio. It is a hands-on exam, just like CKA, CKAD, and all those other exams. So it's performance-based. So when they say it's performance-based, that means that you're going to get a actual environment. You're going to get an actual scenario that you have to solve in that environment. But there's also multiple choice questions as well, right? So it's a mix, and it's an online and it's proctored, right? So you have to have your camera on and all that thing. All right, so these are the 5 topics or 5 groups of topics that we'll talk about this week. And today we'll start with Istio installation, upgrade, and configuration. So in the domains and competencies section, CNCF is telling us these are the things that one should practice, learn, know about, right? So we'll go through these. We'll show how to use the Istio CLI to install Istio on a cluster, basic installation. Then we'll talk about Istio Operator API and see how we can use the Istio Operator to customize the installation. And finally, we'll also look at how to use overlays to manage Istio component settings. So these are things like, let's say you want to deploy or install multiple ingress gateways or multiple egress gateways, or you want to change the name or change the namespaces or even change the Kubernetes resources in terms of how much memory, how much CPU they use, etc. So we'll show how to do those things as well. And then I also have, if we have enough time, we can look at maybe the upgrades and then also how to customize, like do some advanced Helm chart customizations as well. Even though those are not explicitly called out here, you never know what's going to show up on the exam, right? All right, so I do have a couple of slides that I quickly want to go through just so we're all on the same page. I don't know if it's hard to judge from the chat, but I'm assuming at least the majority of people, if not everyone, is familiar with Kubernetes. I don't know if you want to do a poll or not, but I'm assuming you're all familiar at least with Kubernetes, and you probably have some familiarity with Istio as well. But just in case, and this will be like a 1-minute overview. So what is Istio? Istio is a service mesh. Service mesh Istio. It's a service mesh. It's a dedicated infrastructure layer that you can add to your application. And what it does, it allows you to transparently add things like security, observability, routing, traffic management, all that to your apps without changing any of your application's code. The way it does that is by injecting this Envoy proxy, the sidecar that intercepts all the traffic that's entering and all the traffic that's exiting your applications or services. So at a high level, there are 2 components. There's the data plane and the control plane. So the data plane of Istio is made out of all those proxies that are deployed alongside your applications. And in the control plane, the Istio's control plane, that's the place where you actually push the configuration to, and then the control plane is then responsible for taking that configuration, transforming it into Envoy configuration, and then pushing it to the data plane, pushing it to the data to the Envoy proxies, basically. Now, in order to get the control plane and other components into your cluster, you need to install Istio. So how do you do that? Basically, there are 2 ways, and I'm speaking of 2 ways, even though there are 3 of them listed here, and I'll get to that. Why is that in a second? So first one is using the Istio CLI, so istioctl. You can use that to install Istio. The other one is using the Helm charts. The third way that I mentioned here is using the Istio operator. However, Istio operator is discouraged. So you should not be really using it. You should either use the Istio CLI or Helm charts. I think in production, what we see most is people use Helm charts with something like Argo CD, right, to deploy.
Peter, I have a question. Yeah. So in what situation would I want to use the Istio operator for installation of Istio? I mean, even though we wouldn't recommend it for production, what are the circumstances that I'd want to use it?
So, I mean, I don't know if there are any circumstances specifically that are called out. I haven't looked into it recently too much. It is discouraged, but the way that Istio operator basically works is you grab your Istio CLI, and then you say, hey, install this operator, right, into my cluster, and then that operator is responsible for listening to the Istio Istio Operator API resources to install Istio, right? So it's like there's an extra step almost to it, and there's an extra pod that runs in your cluster that's just responsible for the installation. You don't have to do that, right?
So there is a question here. Sorry,
Mhm.
ambient mesh is the new method which doesn't have sidecar, so CERT is based on old concepts. So technically that is true. That's primarily because when ambient mesh was launched, it's sitting in an experimental state. So it's not worth currently testing on something that's experimental that hasn't been heavily used at the moment. But I'll let Peter add some additional thoughts there.
Yeah, I don't think it's part of. It's not explicitly called out in the like in the CNCF stocks if ambient is part of the certification, but it isn't, right? I mean, even though they're not, they would call it out explicitly, I think, if it would be part of it. But one thing that we can expect probably in the next year, I pulled that year out of thin air. I don't have any extra information, but I'm assuming the ambient questions or ambient things will make it to the exam in the near future, I think, right? But as of right now, I don't think it's part of it. It's not explicitly called out anywhere. All right, so what else do I have? Okay, so there's, in terms of the Istio operator, so notice the Istio operator here, and then I'm talking about Istio Operator API here. So sometimes there's like a confusion there when someone says, oh, Istio operator, I'm discouraged to use the Istio operator. Yes, discouraged to use the Istio operator that's basically a pod running inside a cluster. But Istio Operator API is the custom resource CRD that you want to use to install and customize Istio. So that is the thing. So Istio operator is the thing. It's an operator spec. It's a Kubernetes resource, right? And you use it to describe how you want your Istio installation to look like. So just like you have Kubernetes deployments, right? Deployment YAMLs or services, right? You have a resource to describe Istio installation. So here's how the basic operator resource looks like. So we would write this resource, and then we would use Istio CTL, Istio CLI, to install this resource, and we would end up with Istio installed with the default configuration profile. So what are the configuration profiles? So there's 7 of them right now. The default one, which is meant for production deployments, and it includes Istio D, the control plane, and the ingress gateway. There's a demo profile. This is the one that if you're like evaluating Istio, this is what you would go and install typically. And it has Istio D, ingress, egress, and I think it has a higher higher sampling rate, I think, for the traces. Then there's the minimal, which only installs the control plane. So this allows you then to install and configure your ingress gateway separately, right? So you can have multiple of these Istio operator resources, right? So you could use minimal to install the control plane, and then you can use multiple others to configure ingress gateways, configure egress gateways, and so on. The remote one, this is for configuring remote clusters. So there's the whole thing about how to install and how to configure Istio across multiple clusters, how to connect them. This is not part of the exam, at least it's not mentioned explicitly. So we're not going to cover it. If people are interested, we can cover it at a different time. But remote is something that you would use when you configure the remote clusters. Then there's the empty one, which doesn't deploy anything, and typically this is what you would use for like a base profile for your customizations, right? So you would create an Istio operator resource, set the profile to empty, and then manually configure everything that you want there. Preview contains experimental features, so just be aware, don't install that on production because it might contain things that are not 100% production ready. They're experimental. So make sure you don't do that in production. And then finally, the ambient one. This is the last one that got added. And this is the one that you would use to install the ambient mesh. And this one includes the control plane, the CNI, the Z-tunnel, all the new components that are part of Istio ambient mesh. And this is where my slides end. So I don't know what we're going to do next. No, I'm just kidding. I know. I just need to stop sharing it.
By the way, these profiles are on GitHub. It's so github.com istio, and then there's manifest profiles. So all these things is not magic. These profiles, they do come from some YAM definition. I don't know if you want to share, if you can show it. So there is a YAM definition of the profile that contains what components is enabled and what components are not enabled, and the configuration of those components. And that profile generates the Istio Operator configuration that is then applied. So eventually,
yes,
you use istioctl manifest, right, to generate the manifest that will be applied in your cluster. So
yes. Yeah, so I've been going off the configuration of the documentation page, but yes, all of this is on GitHub as well if you want to go through it, right, and look at it. And there's more like explanations here, right, on all the different profiles that are there. And there's also, if you have, let me just check. I think I already installed Istio 119. Yes, I have 119.
Peter, I might want to recommend that you maybe increase the font size on the terminal a little bit.
Okay. Let me know.
That looks good.
That's better.
Yeah.
And I think the text is fine on the left, right? Might be.
The text might need to be enlarged on the...
A little bit as well?
Yeah. Yeah, that should be good.
That's better. Okay. And now I need to sit back. So... anyway, so yeah, istioctl profile dump. So if you run this command, and this is coming from here, right? This will actually show you what the default settings are. So let me see if I can scroll lower. So you'll see it's the Istio operator is the resource, and CNI is not enabled. Egress gateway is not enabled. Ingress gateway is enabled. Pilot is enabled, right? Those are the two components that are available in the default profile. Things like hub, right? So where the actual Docker images get pulled down. Then the configuration for the mesh, that's under the mesh config. And we'll take a look all the different things that you can set there. You can see that the profile is set to default. Tag, which is the version, is set to 119. And tag is basically it's used in the Docker image. It's a Docker image tag, pretty much, right? And then the different settings that go more into details here. So if we look at like some global settings, right? What are the default requests set? The proxy settings, right? So this is telling you all about how your mesh and how the different components get installed, right? Pilot, for example, right? This is, you can see all the settings for the pilot, settings for the telemetry, and that's what it is. So that's the profile dump. If you want to investigate that, you can just dump it into the into a file, and then if you do profile list, it will show you all these. And I guess I probably lied and I didn't include all of them, because I see there's like an external one as well. There's an OpenShift one as well, but those are more specific. I think external is for installing it outside of Kubernetes. I don't even know. It's weird because it's not, I don't think it's mentioned in the documentation, right? So might be leftovers. Or might be an opportunity for someone to take a look and see if this is actually something that shouldn't be there anymore. Or anyway, so configuration profiles. So let's do. Let me see where my links are. So I'll go to. Whoops. Oh, A typo here. There you go. There you go. So if you go to document Istio.io, doc setup Istio, install with istioctl, right? This document, the page actually describes how to get a basic installation of Istio up and running, how do you install it, right? And this one is telling that istioctl supports the full Istio Operator API. So that's the actual API that describes all the different configuration settings that you can set for your mesh, right? So this is what we saw when we ran profile dump command, right? But this is the one that's customized, right? Let's go back here. And what I'll do is I'll just create a kind cluster. If you're following along, feel free to install any other cluster. It doesn't matter, just like using kind. So I've already downloaded Istio, right? I don't have any platform-specific steps, but this would be mostly applicable if you're running in like clusters in the cloud. I guess there are some kind things here. Well, use the latest Go, install Docker, of course, Docker memory limit. So if you're having any issues with like memory or something like that, make sure you increase it in the Docker settings. And then, yeah, and these are the other things. If you're using like Minikube or any other clouds, make sure you check out the platform setup that's specific to those things. Requirements for pods and services. I don't think this is like installation specific necessarily. Yeah, it might be if you're using like CNI and things like this in terms of like capabilities, but this doesn't really look like something that's related to installation per se, right? It's just telling you which ports are used by Istio, right? So there's no conflict, right?
There's another comment to increase the screen res, so probably maybe adjusting the font size again on the terminal.
Oh, on the terminal?
And maybe as well as the dock side.
All right, let's do. Whoa, this is way too.
Yeah, okay. I guess we'll have to leave it at that.
Yeah. But this, if let me post this in the channel or in the comments, I guess, if people want to follow along. Oh, this was not the right one. It was this one. Sorry about that. There we go. But I'll try to. I mean, I can make it this if this makes it any easier, I guess. Okay. All right, so we've downloaded Istio. If you haven't downloaded Istio, if you go try Istio, this will just take you to the page, and it's just run the scroll command to download the latest Istio, which is 1.19. And I'm assuming, I don't think they mentioned specifically which version of Istio is used in the exam, but you can assume it's the latest one. And I don't think there's any specific features that would differ so much between the versions, right? 1080 would be amazing. Okay. We'll try to do it for tomorrow then, 1080. All right, so what is the simplest way to install Istio? Just the default profile. Well, it's very simple. You do istioctl install, right? And this one will tell you that it's going to install 1.19 using the default profile, and it will include Istio Core, Istio-D, and Ingress Gateway. Proceed, yes. And then this will take a couple of seconds, and it will install everything on our cluster. Might be waiting a little bit.
So what are the key components that get installed again when you're using the demo profile?
No, I'm using the default profile because I didn't specify anything.
Okay.
Yeah, so what it installs, it just installs Istio-D, the control plane, and the Istio Ingress Gateway, right?
Got it. Okay.
So if we take a look, just do and Istio system. If you look into Istio system, you'll see that we have the ingress gateway, and we got Istio the control plane. Right? So this is all it takes to install Istio, right? So if you ever hear someone saying, "Oh, Istio is so hard to install," well, it's not really, right? It's just one command, so it's fairly easy. Now, if you want to go and configure things, right? The install command also supports the set flags, so you can directly update or set the values for certain settings from the Istio operator. So if I open just for a second Istio operator on this side, and we'll see mesh config. So if you access log file, right, this one is telling us that in the actually mesh config. Sorry. Let's do a search. And just for a second. So if we look for a mesh config, access log file. There you go. Right. So with this command here, set mesh config access log, we're basically configuring address for the proxy access log, right? So we're writing it to the standard out, right? And same way, we could configure the access log format. We could enable tracing. We could set the TCP keep alive. We could set the proxy HTTP port, like all those things. We could do it with -- set flag.
Do you mind me asking a question? Because I see this flag all the time, right? So this so redirects the sidecar outputs of the access log to the standard out, so it can be seen by whatever you're using to log, even by the simple kubectl log. But why this is not the default? Where are they going, the audit logs, if you don't?
I don't think they're written to anything, the access logs.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think they're, yeah. You have to. It doesn't say what the default setting is, though, right? Empty value disables access logging. Yeah. I would have to take a look what the default one is, right? But
I wonder why this is not the default, right? So,
might be a question for.
It's probably a very verbose, of course, right? So
yeah, for sure, right? But this is just a way to show you, right? Like all these settings, you can set them from the command line if you want to. But now, if you can imagine, if you have something like if you want to change the proxy configuration, right, which is more complex, right, and it can contain multiple, like, see all the different settings, right? Setting that through the command line can be painful, right? So you don't want to necessarily have an Istio install command with like 15 different set flags, right? Yeah, and it works the same way. Oh, it's you, Marino, right? I'm getting, I hear myself. Yeah, and it's the same thing, like just like you would use it in like Helm values file, right? You can set it to istioctl as well, right? But we'll talk about Helm a little bit later. You wanted to say something, Marino, and I'll be quiet. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, that does help if I unmute. So quick sidebar, I do see a question from Anil about the future of Istio. So we have seen some of the features of Istio through Ambient Mesh's offering, which gives us a sidecarless approach to Istio, which doesn't mean that regular Istio goes away. It just means that if you have workloads that are server-send first protocols or don't do so well with the sidecar attached, that's where Ambient Mesh comes in. Now, there's also a lot of work being done to further optimize it, test the limits of scale with Ambient and even with regular Istio. But we're going to start to see more of like connectivity to regular workloads, non-containerized workloads. And it's already kind of happening. We're seeing VM-based workloads being attached to the mesh. And interestingly enough, on the 5th day, we're going to cover how to do that in this little live stream. So there's a little bit of future there. I will say that if you take a look at some of the open source Istio community calls, attend them, you'll be able to gain some better insights as to where the project is going and some of the additional things coming down the pipe.
Yeah, that's for sure. Alessandro says one word: ambient. Yes, it is kind of the new thing, right? That, but just to point it out, right? Istio, the sidecar Istio is not going anywhere either, right? It's just another option that makes it, ambient is just an extra option that makes it much easier to adopt the mesh in general, right? All right, so let's, so we have Istio. I just do this again, the same command. We have the one with the default profile installed. Another thing that's useful, especially if you're like playing with Istio, is you want to uninstall it, and you do uninstall and -- purge just to make sure to remove everything, and this will uninstall Istio from your cluster. Let's do the list, Istio system. Nothing's there, right? So we removed everything. Now, if you wanted to install the demo profile, well, we can use -- set profile, and this will do the demo profile, right? Same thing as before. The only difference is that this time we will also install the egress gateway. Now, this command is equivalent to, and let me just copy this. I'm cheating a little bit here. And I'll make this bigger, right? Right, so if we comment this out, oops, that's not the right YAML comment. This command, set profile demo, is exactly the same as this Istio operator resource, right? It does the exact same thing. So if we show this as well, uninstall, whoops. If you do -y, it's going to automatically confirm it for you. So we don't have Istio. Now, to install this, what you would do is you do istioctl install -f, and then we want to paste this in. Now, going back to that Istio operator thing, like if we had the Istio operator running, which is not suggested that you do, right? You wouldn't have to use istioctl, right? At that point, you could do istio kubectl apply, and then apply this resource, right? So that's one of the differences, the way that you would install it with the operator there. So do istioctl install f, paste this in, and this is going to do the exact same thing, right? So those two commands are equivalent. Right? Let me move this out of the way here. Installing a different profile, that's what we did. Check what's installed. So if we do get deploy and, whoops, get deploy and Istio system, you'll see we have the egress gateway, we have the ingress gateway, and we have Istio D. Now, the other thing that we can take a look is this Istio operator resource. So this one is created by IstioD in the Istio system namespace. It's called installed state. So if we look at this one, I can do OYAML here. You'll notice that we get the, whoops, the actual Istio operator, right, that was applied with all the different settings, the versions, the same thing that we saw when we did istioctl dump. Was it profile dump, right? Oh, the only difference was that profile dump was, I think you can paste that in, profile, right? So if we do dump profile demo, right, this would be the same as what we deployed right now. We showed the Istio profile list, display the configuration. We just showed the profile dump demo, right, where you can take a look at the different things. There's also a way to look at the subset of the configuration. This is interesting if you're components.pilot, if you're like troubleshooting or trying to figure out, oh, what are the resources, CPU requests and memory values set for the pilot component, right? Then you could do profile dump and be specific and say, oh, components.pilot is the thing that I want to look at, right? And then you could go and dump the whole config, change this, create your own Istio operator YAML, and then deploy it if you want to, right? So this is helpful if there's a question in the exam, right, that requires you to like compare and look at the configurations maybe, right? This is how you could get to it. Also, one note on the exam, I did look through the through their, I think I was candidate, one of these links here, either frequently asked questions or candidate handbook. They aren't explicitly saying yet what you can use when you're going through the exam. But I'm assuming you will be able to use or access the documentation, because you guys can correct me, the ones who did the CKA, CKAD. I think you can use and access Kubernetes.io, right?
You
Yes,
can
you can.
use the docs. Yeah. So all the domains under Kubernetes.io, it's okay to navigate to. Also the blogs. I mean, everything under the domain Kubernetes.io.
Okay.
It might be changing though. I'm not sure, but yeah, definitely you can open another tab and you can, especially important for Kubernetes, you can go to the API.
Yes.
So maybe for Istio, maybe they let you navigate to istio.io to get the.
Yeah, I'm assuming, I haven't found it in the documentation of the certification yet, but I'm assuming you can do that, right?
Yeah. So the exam is proctor, right? So it's not like if you open another tab, I mean, they will look at it. So and if
Yes,
it's some question, there's a recording of your
Yeah.
exam. So don't try.
Yeah. So it's either like I wouldn't even try it, because either they have it blocked, and even if it's not blocked, they'll see you like accessing a page that you shouldn't be accessing, and it's definitely not worth your losing your money, right? Because that's what's going to happen, right? You're not going to pass if you cheat. The other, just the last one here under profile, is the diff command, and this one will show you the differences between the two profiles. But for example, the difference between the demo and the default one is in the amount of like memory requests and CPU requests that are set. And then you can find the others, like auto scale is enabled in one and disabled in the other. And then there's some extension provider specified here for the tracing, and so on, right? So you look at these differences as well, right? And then you can also like generate an actual manifest. So let's do manifest generate. Let's see what this one does, right? Now, the previous one, the dump one, right? So istioctl dump profile dump. Can I do grep? How do I get the first 3 lines? I never know how to do that. There we go, right? But profile dump will actually give you the Istio operator resource, right? But if you're going to do the istioctl manifest generate, this one will actually give you the actual like Kubernetes service resource, right? For istiod. Sorry, I'm scrolling in a weird way here. Kubernetes services, right? Horizontal pod autoscalers, role bindings. I think this one might be the, what is this one? It's a pilot, right? This is the pilot here. So it shows you the actual Kubernetes deployments, Kubernetes services, all the Kubernetes native resources, right? That make up the actual whole manifest, right? Not just the Istio operator, right? But with Istio operator, you're telling it, here's the Istio stuff, go and install it, right? And then Istio knows how to like use these deployments. It has these deployments in there, right? But if you actually want to do the manifest to get the whole thing, if you want to change like some things that are not easily changed in Istio operator, if you really want like fine-tune control on across like for your installation, then you would do the manifest generate. Grep -A3, is it? No, I don't know. Maybe I'm using a wrong grep here. But anyway, doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. There's also the verify install command. And I'm thinking can you run this? Yeah. So if you do verify install, this is definitely useful for troubleshooting, right? I'm thinking there could be like something on the certification that tells you, hey, here's a broken installation, right? Go and figure out what's wrong. Maybe you could use verify install just to make sure that like Istio is actually correctly installed. if things are there, if things are not missing, right? So I'm assuming if we would, can I delete one of these? I'm curious what happens. So if I delete the pod disruption budget, this guy, let's say this one, Istio system. There you go. So I deleted it. So I'm assuming I'm going to get, yeah, there you go. Right. So this one will tell you, oh, the pod disruption budget for policy for the Istio Ingress gateway was not found, right? Meaning something's wrong with your installation, right? Oh, describe. Oh, great. Oh, yeah. It has to be a word. What's Chad is saying. Yeah, it has to be, you have to actually grep for something, not just get the first lines. And then uninstalling, we just did the purge, right? So uninstall everything, and that's what you're going to do if you want to clean it up, if you want a clean start. Okay, so next one is Helm. So whatever we did, oh, actually, let me uninstall. Install, uninstall, --purge, purge, -y. There you go, all gone. So the next thing that you can do, instead of using the CLI, you can use the Helm charts, right? And the thing here in the documentation, if I make it a little bit bigger, right? The charts are the same underlying charts that are used when you're installing Istio using Istioctl, right? So it's the same source. Istioctl has those built in, right? So let's see, what do we need? Same thing, Helm, client 3.6, I think I have, yeah, 3.10, we're good there. You have to configure your Helm repository, so let's do that one. I think mine is configured anyway, but yep, all good. And then just to install it, this is how you do. You would use Helm install, the release, the chart, the namespace, and then if you want to create the namespace, and --set, just like you would use in the istioctl, to set any other parameters, or you can use the values file, which is the actual big thing with Helm that you can use, right? So you can specify your values file and then just paste it, like use those when installing, right? All right, so yeah, you can skip this if you're using --create namespace. So Helm can create the namespace for you. And then the first thing we'll do is we'll install the base chart, which contains the cluster-wide resources, right? So all of these things that have to be installed before you actually deploy the control plane. So you do Istio install, Istio base, Istio/base to this namespace. We're also setting the default revision, and revisions are something that are used when you're doing upgrades, right? We might get to that topic. And then the other thing that I'll do here is create namespace, even though I think I have the namespace created, right? Whoa, that was me scrolling, by the way. It wasn't an error. So Istio base deployed. So let's look at the status of it. I think that's the, oh, Istio. Is this? Why is this? Is it Helm releases? LS? A? Namespace. Name is Istio base. Why isn't this? Oh, probably, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it has to be. So Istio base was installed. Yeah, we did ls Istio system, and it's going to show you that base chart that's deployed. It's 119. And then to deploy the control plane, we use the Istio D chart. Let's do this one. And if we look at the Istio system namespace, you'll see we have Istio D running, right? So there's a question, silly question. Do we need to set pod security admission annotations and the Istio CNI? So I'm not sure. You don't have to set the security admission annotations. I don't know exactly what your why would you need to set that, or how, like, that part. And for the Istio CNI, if you want to use Istio CNI, you would enable it, right? You can do enabled on the. I think there's a complete separate section.
Yeah. So for the Istio CNI, I mean, there are a few instances where you would actually use it. So the first instance would be you have security teams that don't want you to have like net admin or net proc capabilities at a pod level. So what that means is when the sidecar comes online, it has no ability to rewrite IP tables to have traffic flow out of it instead of the main application container in your pod. So by actually deploying the Istio CNI, you can make those reroutes happen for traffic leaving the sidecar or leaving the application container and going towards the sidecar and then getting towards its destination. So that's the first instance. The second instance, actually, the Istio CNI is used in ambient mesh in the case of doing the exact same thing, where it's actually reprogramming or rerouting the traffic from an application container over directly to something called the Z tunnel, which is supposed to be a flavor of the sidecar, but just not a sidecar itself. So there's a little bit about that. We'll probably explore a little bit more as we get on with the week as well. Sorry, Peter, go for it.
Yeah. And for the pod security admission, so there's a separate guide that you can go there through that's going to show you how to do this, right? And it explains how to install it to enforce the specific policies. You would have to label the things, and then you would have to install Istio with CNI, right? But this is the setting. If you want to use the CNI, you would say the CNI enabled equals true, and then the labels that you would set on the Istio system namespace, right, to enforce the policies. But other than that, there's nothing specifically on Istio that you would have to do, right, other than enabling the CNI, right? Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, there's another question. Well, I think there's a follow-up question around Kubernetes security post pod security policies. Oh, so you're talking about pod security admission, which is the artifact or resource that took over PSPs.
But yeah, I don't. I'm not. But this, yeah. If you have any specific things, I can take a look into this one. But honestly, I haven't looked too much with like combination of the bot security admission with Istio and all that.
Also, well, at this point, we don't know which version of Kubernetes we're going to find at the exam, right? So we can only speculate.
Yes.
With 128 being out, I suppose is nothing less than 127. So you can still, I mean, of course, there is pod security admission, and PSPs are deprecated, but I wouldn't bother too much or worry too much.
To me, honestly, this sounds like a more like very, I'm not gonna say niche, but more like a advanced type of thing. Might come up, but honestly, I don't think it would in the exam. That specific thing, right? All right, so we've installed the Istio, the base chart, right? So we have Istio D running. Now, if you want to install the Kubernetes Ingress gateway, you would have to use a separate Istio gateway gateway chart. And let's just create a namespace. Create namespace Istio Ingress, and then we can use Helm install Istio Ingress, Istio Gateway to the Istio Ingress resource. Of course. Create namespace, and then I don't have it in history. All right. Let's do this guy. There we go. Install the Ingress Gateway. And this is more componentized, I guess, if that's the right word. because you can install STOD separately. There's a separate chart, and there's another generic chart for the gateways, which you can either use for Istio ingress or egress. By the way, those are the exact same things, right? Istio ingress and Istio egress gateway. They're just named differently. But underneath, behind it is the same thing that's running. So let's see, why is this taking so long? Deployed, Istio base, Istio D. Why is this taking? This is taking too long, right? What did I miss? Oh, Istio ingress. Oh, it's running. It's running. I don't know why. Is my Helm command? Why did it fail? Because I canceled it? Maybe.
But it's there, yeah.
Yeah, it's there. I don't know why. Maybe something froze in my computer, but I canceled it. That's why it shows failed. So, yeah. And then if you want to update things, typically you would just create a values file, right? And then just do update, use Helm just to update the same release or create a new release. All right, let's clean this up, and then we'll talk about the customization. So delete. Actually, you know what? Let me just do this way. Let's go nuclear. Just create a cluster. It's fast enough anyway. So instead of manually deleting all the Helm charts, then yeah. All right, so let's find the customization. That one is more interesting. There we go. All right, so we have another empty cluster. Get pods. Yep, nothing there. And go to the customize installation thing. We've done all this, Istio Operator, right? And this is then the simplest thing to install something or to configure something is using --set, which is something that we already did, right? And then, yeah, you can either do it this way or create a YAML file and then just pass it in as a file, which we did earlier as well. And these are the things that you, like, if you want to configure or customize something, these are the components names that you have to know about, right? So if there's a scenario that tells you, change something in the pilot components, right? This is the component that you would use, or ingress gateway or egress gateway, right? And that's where you would have to go and change the things, right? So let's say if you wanted to install Istio without the pilot, right? You can set that enabled value to false, right? Or another one would be, kind of defies the purpose, but let's say you have, just make this a little bit bigger. Well, this is the biggest I can get with VS Code. So I'll go one lower. So it's so let's say we wanted to install the demo profile and ignore the Copilot. Install the demo profile, but we want to disable the egress gateway, right? How would we do this? We would do, let's see, egress gateway, I'm assuming, right? And then enabled equals false, right? So if we would do this, and I hope this works. If not, we'll have to figure it out. Install. Oh, it's not. I know I missed something. What did I miss? Error unmarshal. Oh, whoops. I think it's like this, right? There you go. Istio install. No.
Don't you just love YAML indentation?
Oh, it's like, I think it Istio egress, Istio egress gateway. I think you have to specify the name. I haven't done this in a while, so let me see. Oops. Ah, there you go. Right. So let me do a clean screen here. so it looks better. So istioctl install this file, right? So we're installing the demo profile, which contains everything, right? Ingress, egress, and control plane. But then we're explicitly saying, hey, for the ingress gateways, note that this has to be a dash here or minus here because you can have more than one egress gateway, right? And this is the default one, right? This is the name of the default one, Istio egress gateway. So we have to refer to it by name, right? We're saying, yeah, we don't want to install this one. And we're explicitly setting it to false because remember in the demo profile, it's set to true, right? It includes it automatically. So if we would try to deploy this, it would tell us, oh, you're installing Istio Core, Istio D, and ingress gateways. There's no egress gateways, right? Now, if you wanted to do the same for ingress gateways, we would do ingress gateway, right? Those are the default names, right? So let's see what happens here. Istioctl install -f. Boom, there you go. So this one is just saying, oh, okay, so you only want to install Istio. No ingress gateway, no egress gateway, right? Now, let's say another thing is, let's say we don't like the default name of the ingress gateway, right? We want to have another one that's called Peter's gateway for whatever reason, right? Do Peter's -gateway enabled true, right? We want that one. So it's to install. There you go. So this one is now saying an install ingress gateway. So if you would go ahead and install this, we're going to end up with a gateway with this default name, Peter's gateway. Right? I don't know why would someone name it Peter's gateway, but it's just for the demo. Okay, there you go. So if we look at the pods and the Istio system, you'll see that the pod is named Peter's gateway, and then services, Istio system. You get the Peter's gateway, right, which is a load balancer type. Let's do clear. Hello, Arsh. I was trying to go through the install process earlier. I was a bit confused. Well, awesome. Hopefully this clears up the confusion at least a little bit. Yeah, it's not Istio installation is not complex. If someone tells you it's hard to install, I don't know. Tell them to come and talk to us. It shouldn't be hard. Yeah. All right. So
yeah, I'm just going to add something on top of that. So it's easy enough to get up and running, installed, running anywhere you want. The harder part is actually deciding how you're going to operate this in production. That's the hard part, right?
Yes, because there's always it's easy to get started quickly, not necessarily for production, but then once you start figuring out, oh, I need to customize this, I need to customize that, you might get overwhelmed with a lot of different settings, a lot of different configurations. But I think I would say, and again, I'm pulling this number out of thin air, 90% of things, 90% of scenarios are probably covered by like all these different options and configurations that you can change, right? The other thing that you can do through the Istio Operator API. So one of the things that we talked about earlier is, let me just find that link. Let me just. Actually, let me do search here. Oops. We do. Where's this? Oh, there it is. So search mesh config, right? This is one of the things that we talked about. Global mesh options. So these are the mesh config settings that I mentioned earlier. So it was what is the access log file, was it? Yeah, it was this one, right? And this is in mesh config. So let me look at where did we have that example? Mesh config. Anyway, I can figure it out, right? So we would do, let's go here. I think it's mesh config, mesh mesh config, and then we'd say access log file. What was it? Or actually, let's take this one, right? There's the global thing as well. Global logging level debug, right? And if we would do this, install. Oh, what did I? Oh, I missed the. This is the problem with these, like, with YAML in general. It's very. I think it's like this, right? That's why, like, when you're doing this exam, it's extremely important that you. Oh, it's values, that you actually go and practice these things. Because you don't really want to mess your exam by, like, things like these, right? Where you, like, don't know the actual YAML and how to apply it. There you go. I got it finally, right? So values global, right? And I just wanted to show how this, like, the values that you can set on the command line translate to YAML, right? So the same thing with how we did this, we could do the, where is it again? Mesh config. We could do the access log file, right? It's an access log file. And I think this one will show. This one is the mesh config, and I think that would be, yeah, make it values global. It's mesh config. It's either here or access log file. And dev standard out. So let's cancel this. Install. There you go, right? So global values, and then mesh config specific values, and then specific components that you want to set or change. And then this was all the segue just to talk about configuring the Kubernetes deployments, if I can find it. Okay, I'll reopen it again. There's too many links. Customizing the installation. There you go. And customize Kubernetes settings. There you go. Right. So we can customize the global values, customize mesh config, customize components, and then also customize the Kubernetes settings for each specific component, right? So things like resources, replica counts, pod annotations, service annotations, node selectors, affinity, anti-affinity, services toleration strategy, environments, pod security context, and all those other things. So here's how you would, for example, this one is showing you an overlay file, right? Kubernetes overlay that shows you how to configure and adjust the resources, and then horizontal pod auto scaling, right? So if you wanted to do this for, let's make this a little bit bigger here. Let's say we wanted to configure this for this ingress gateway. I think the way that we would do it is we would say Kubernetes resources, and then let's say requests, right? Requests, CPU. I don't know actually what the default values are, so I'm making stuff up here or just copying whatever's there, but there you go. And then if we try to deploy this guy, istioctl install -f. Yes, let's go ahead. And then if we're going to take a look, we'll see that the ingress gateway deployment. Oh, actually, this is telling you that it worked. I don't have enough memory to do 4 gigabytes or GB bytes, I guess. But we could change it to. Let's do.
It's probably because there is a limit already.
Oh, it's my memory, right? It's saying invalid value must be less or equal to the memory limit.
No, I think because the profile already, or the Helm chart rather, has a default limit. Yes, and then you are trying to
Could be.
request for more.
You're right.
Right.
Yes, you're completely right. Let's do the Istio Ingress Gateway. Yeah, you're completely right.
I can find the value. I mean, it's probably somewhere in the. I mean, of course, on GitHub you get the. Istio manifest charts.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Right, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
Almost there. Oh, okay. So the limits are yeah. So the memory limits are set. That's why I can't request more.
Yeah.
Right.
So whatever you are passing as a value goes
Right, yeah.
to overwrite that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So if I would do requests of the default to 5 and this to this to 20, and this should work, right? Let's see, because it's below the limits that are set. Right.
Crossing fingers.
Did I? Oh, was it because I did too many? Oh, because we had the revision tag or something at some point, right? Let's do istioctl install -- purge. Let's do this. Istioctl install f. Yeah, but I think this should work now. Yeah, so actually there was the I was trying to request more that I was allowed to request, right? But then on the other hand, what we could also do if we wanted to is we could say requests, and then we could say limits, right? And we could increase those if we wanted to as well.
Yeah, this way you are also overriding the default Helm values.
Yes. Yeah. So whatever, like whenever you say, it takes for whatever the profile is, right? Since I started with the demo profile, whatever the demo profile has the default values for Ingress gateways, that's what it's going to be used unless you go and override it, right? Or change the values, right? Yeah, and I think these are just the other ways, right? Istio setting using the Helm. It would be the same thing that you would do it. Multiple ingress gateways can be defined. Yeah, it's a list. That's what I was. Oh, actually, there you go. This is what's showing us. Similar example, right? Kubernetes resources request, and then you could change other things if you want to, right? Service annotations in this case, the port names if you want to. And I guess this is the interesting one here. Profile dump might be. Yeah, this will just show you the default values for the gateway, but I'm surprised that it's not showing me like the other settings. But yeah, it's a list type. This is one thing that you don't want to forget, and you'll quickly get an error if you do, right? That it is a list. And then the same thing. Oh, we haven't shown that one, but it's the same for the pilot, right? We would do the same thing if you wanted to modify pilot resources, for example, right? You would do it the same way, right? You would go and modify stuff here, just like it's here on the configuration. So if I was preparing for the exam, it doesn't even seem like you have to like memorize a lot of things, since you have access to the documentation, right? But definitely remember these, right? The component names, know the global component, know the global settings, where the global settings are, the mesh config, the actual values themselves. I mean, you have access to the configuration, to the documentation, right? So just know where the mesh config documentation page is. So if on the certification and ask you to change the access log file or something, you know where to look for, or look for the default values or whatever you need to look at, right? And then same thing for ingress and egress gateways. Just know where to look for things. I think that's important as well, along with knowing what you're doing, right? So yeah, so this is how we're over, right? Like 15 minutes over. Any specific questions anyone might have for installation explicitly? Why is service mesh so complicated? I'm going to turn it around and ask, what's complicated about it? Or what is the thing that makes you think that it's complicated, or makes it complicated for you and complex for you? I've heard these like this a lot, and I would agree. Like in the early days of Istio, it was fairly it was complicated, and there were a lot of things. It was very hard to install if you think about it, right, back then. But I think we're far from that, right? So it's gotten much easier and less complicated and complex. But if you have any specific things that you think are complicated, let us know, right? And we can probably make it less complicated for you. If we have Calico in the setup, then Istio is mandatory too or optional. I don't think it would be mandatory, or why?
Let's look at it a different way. You still need a CNI to run in your cluster, because if you don't have a CNI, none of the pods can communicate with each other. But in the case of Istio and it being mandatory to run in Kubernetes, it really comes down to the needs of your organization and if you're ready for it. Like, I feel like everyone's going to need a service mesh, but where they are along that journey is going to entirely depend on what their environment is, the kinds of workloads that they run, how much they've embraced Kubernetes, and so forth. And I think we lost Alessandro.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So yeah, let me switch back to the comments. Yeah, so Calico, yeah, it's not mandatory, right? Sebastian saying, I don't think the concept is complicated. I guess the biggest question I'm seeing is operating. What do you recommend orgs use on a large scale to manage service mesh?
So without jumping into any sort of pitches or anything like that, there are enterprise grade service meshes that abstract on top of something like Istio. So for example, Peter and I work for a company called Solo, and they have something called Glue Mesh, and that is an abstraction on top of Istio, which it actually helps simplify the onboarding experience. It helps with managing service mesh across multiple clusters. It actually treats everything as more of a single fabric than having to manage individual instances of Istio. But there's a lot of customizability you gain. But on the flip side, when you think about like the amount of toil that goes through having to build out configurations for every single environment you have that runs Istio, it might be ideal to use something like an enterprise grade service mesh, like Glue Mesh.
Yes, I definitely agree. Definitely agree with that. Also, if you see at the bottom, the scrolling ticker down there, I added the link to our to the GitHub repo, and we'll try to put like, I guess, slides, even though there's not a lot of them. At least there weren't a lot of them today, right? But we'll put slides and interesting links there. Basically, trying to build the reference repo one can use to like prepare for the exam or just learn about Istio in general.
Exactly. So we are doing this all over again tomorrow. Alessandro is going to be driving our traffic management session, and that's actually going to be a pretty long session, and it's going to be pretty deep as well, because if you look at the blueprint for the ICA, it's about 40% of the exam. So there's a lot of content and a lot of practice that's going to be required to be able to get you to that level. But here's the other thing. So you notice that Peter was effectively using a simple terminal kind cluster and basically sourcing all his information from the docs. That's the experience we expect you to follow through with and be able to go into the exam with, being able to navigate the documentation, knowing where to pull example configurations. So you're not having to sit there scratching your head, where do I find this? There's a question, do you prefer taking Istio Certified Associate before CK? No, I actually think the opposite. I think you should take your CK first before attempting to do the ICA. The reason behind that is if you don't understand Kubernetes essentials and foundations, you're going to have a harder time working through the Istio Certified Associate exam, because you need to understand Kubernetes primitives to be able to understand how things function inside of Istio as well. There is no hard requirement to actually take the CKA or CCAD or KCNA beforehand, but I recommend it. And even if you have, okay, so you do have a background in Kubernetes already. I mean, if you feel confident enough going through that existing CKA blueprint and you think you know you can do everything on there, then skip it and go right for the ICA.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think, like, if you don't have Kubernetes knowledge, I mean, get familiar with it. It's the basis of everything, right? But if you already know Kubernetes, if you know how, like, if you're very well versed with kubectl, listing things, deploying things, applying things, editing things, looking at different things, troubleshooting stuff with kubectl without istioctl involved, I don't think there will be any issues with going with Istio Cert first, right? We'll provide more info and today. Yes, we'll figure out how the way to upload the slides somehow to that repo, and then all the links that I've used, all the things that I went through, and yeah, I'll try to update this today, so we'll have it there as a reference. But yeah, just to like strengthen the point that Marino made earlier, right? There's no secret knowledge here. There's no like secret documentation or examples and code or whatnot, right? Istio.io, go through it. It's more than enough, in my opinion, right? If you go through all the examples in Istio.io, if you're familiar with all the concepts, I mean, it's easy to say, I guess, right? Like, oh, just go through the Kubernetes, all the website and everything, and you'll be able to pass. But there's no secret knowledge. That's what I was trying to say, right? Just pure Istio.io, go through it, practice, and you'll be good. All right. Well, thanks everyone. If there's no other questions, we'll update the repo. Come back tomorrow, same place, same time. We'll be here. Alessandro will be talking about traffic management, and there's going to be, I think, more meat on that bone than there was today with the installation. So, all right. I hope to see everyone tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. See ya.